what I learned about myself in that teaching experience was that I was teaching very young kids. So I teach them grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, and grade 6, back to back to back. The truest expression of myself at that time was my younger self. So I was a big man. I'm 6'3", but I was hanging out with little boys and girls, and I wanted to play the same things they did. I just didn't know it. Hey, you guys want to go out and play soccer? I was the teacher who was playing soccer. You want to go see how high we can climb these trees? Okay, how are we going to keep ourselves safe? How are we going to keep everyone in the community care safe? Okay, we're going to make little spotting things. Okay, we should only go to that branch. That's a great idea. Let's try it. How are we going to get our friend who can climb really well to have fun? What about our friend who's never climbed at all? How do we do this, right? Oh, our superstar climber is going to pair up with the young little guy who's never climbed before. Watch this. The other thing, and I didn't realize this till I stopped teaching, I would refer to all my students as friend. Say, hey friend, hey friends, how are you doing? And that change in vernacular from students or cohort to friends created a community of care immediately.
Wow.
And yeah, so that's a little bit.
Yeah. I mentioned that you are a bringer of games,
yeah.
and, even at Liberty Rising where C3 was, we've had many of those moments to climb that Mount George. There's a big part that's slippery and questionable, and we get everybody up, elders, those who are fully able and equipped, and those who are not. We do our best to get everybody up in a good way and have successfully. And that's another part that we get to practice.
Absolutely.
And especially as adults, the playing for many of us stops and it becomes purely competitive, especially as we go into our careers and things.
Absolutely.
And so, to have that inverse experience of practicing to see what is the best way to get everyone through versus like, who's the fastest at getting through.
Exactly.
It's such a different way to relate. And you brought that game, the electric fence, now called Rope. And I love that one. It's the same energy. If anybody's listening this far, that Rope, man, we just had an experience at Prime Leadership, and they got everybody over. 2 guys had knee braces on, And in this game I'm about to describe, there's a rope tied between 2 trees. It's higher than a limbo. It's chest high, and we get everybody over.
Yeah.
It's very simple, but it brings up so much. Like I could analyze it for days. But the brother took the leap last moment, and the first time did not do it.
Yep.
First time did not, and the second time, and what happens? That deflated. Oh, now we have someone to blame. Exactly. And the second time with the timer and the energy cleared it, and then gets raised up as the hero, gets the chance to practice the inverse.
Yep.
Sometimes all we get to practice is that failure moment, and we don't get the opportunity to correct it or to have another actual experience of doing it again, because we've created some kind of it's born out of the desire to be collaborative, but the kind of like the hunger for competition takes over.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful, like when I think of that game, it's a beautiful metaphor for community creation, because we work collaboratively, right? We're getting people over the rope. And then it always comes down to last person. Who's the last person? And in my experience with this game, it's often the big athlete. And it's like, I can jump that. Yeah, well, I jump that. I was a high school, track star or what have you. There's always a leap of faith. There's always a leap of faith at the end. And the question is, how does the community respond to that leap of faith? Because we need all of us. We need all of us. We don't need part of us. We need all of us. And I've
say it again for the ones in the back.
We need all of us, and I've played that game countless times with age groups from, 8-year-old kids all the way to elders. I've only ever seen it not succeed once. I've seen it take a long time, but only once I've seen it not succeed. And it was with a group of businessmen in a place, Calgary, just down the road. We started the game at about 10:30 in the morning. And I thought, this will be great. Before lunch. They wouldn't do it. They refused to do it. Because with this particular group, there were a few characters who they were the single piece. They were the single string. They weren't a part of the fabric. And they refused. They wouldn't step into the fabric. And they would try. But when something went wrong, they immediately pulled their string out and said, your fault, your fault, your fault. Which encouraged other people to pull their string out and say, hold on, you're blaming me. It's not my fault. It's that person. It was a wild experience. Thought to myself, if that's what's happening in a game, what's happening in your life? What's happening in your life? Right?
Yeah.
So I think play is so wildly important, and it's important for a couple of reasons. One, what you stated, often it becomes competition. So people forget to play. The other piece, and I'd argue this piece is equally, if not more important, is it's accessing your inner child. It's accessing the little boy who's rolling around with you every day, who for a lot of men hasn't been contacted. Decades. Was told not, okay, you're done being a little boy. Man up, be a good teenager, be a good young man. Well, what about little G, who's rolling around here? He's here. He's literally with me all the time. How do I feed him? Because I'm feeding my body. I'm working out my body. I'm learning. What about him? I'm a type 1 diabetic, right? And you know this, but here's a piece. Little G in me, and I check in with him, loves one thing more than everything else. It's very bizarre.
That Sour Patch Candy?
Well, exactly. It's called a dilly bar. It's like an ice cream sandwich. It is like arguably the worst thing for a diabetic to be eating, right?
A dilly bar.
Who goes and gets a dilly bar once a week? This guy. Because when I check in with him, he's like, hey, I'd really like one of those. It's really hot right now. All right, bud. If I don't have a connection to my own inner child, what I see in a therapeutic practice for people who have this is their inner child ends up driving the bus, particularly when they're scared, when they're feeling dysregulated, things like this. And that usually shows up in the form of regret. I don't know, I'm not a guy who yells, but I just yell. Oh, okay. Let's put our hand on our heart. Let's check in with you, young. I was really scared. Oh, so you responded in the way that you would have when you were 6. Stop. That's why play is so important, because it brings those parts online.
Yeah. One of the other interesting things to note about the games and play is that it doesn't take language. And so there's the big question out there. How do men get out of their head and into their hearts? It's like super effective to go through play. We also do it through fighting, through combat and other things, even hiking. Get out of your head, put your one foot in front of the other. It's a deep meditation. But those games, there's so much said in between, in the actions, even in the emotion, that emotion of failure, that when it comes through, when it erupts through a crowd, and it's yeah. There's no words for that. That's a physiological response, as is that winning the victory, the pose of victory. It's unconscious and the arms are raised.
Exactly.
And so these games, they remind us and they get us into our bodies in such a real way. And you keep referencing like that, 2 hands on the heart and breathe. There's so many guys that, they got 2 heads on the head hyperventilating. Yeah. And so it's like, wherever you're at on your journey, know that play is such a radical tool, and don't do it to win.
Exactly.
If there is such a thing, if there is collaborative play out there, I think that this is another way to teach.